Dr. Don Ball from Auburn University, one of the outstanding forage agronomists in this country. He retired a couple of years ago. He did something quite interesting right after he retired. He and I have spent a lot of time eating at restaurants and talking about every topic that you can think about, including topics like what kind of car do you like the best? He's a Corvette man. And right after he retired, just a couple of weeks, he went and bought him a red Corvette. Just recently I was down there and he let me drive that through the epicenter of football, as he calls it. Now, I'm not sure what that. I drove it right by Toomer's Corner. He's going to talk about forage quotes and concepts. Dr. Don Ball.
Thank you. What a great audience, and what a great opportunity to have the opportunity to speak to this group. Now, I know that a lot of you who know me are thinking to yourself, why would they have him on the program? And furthermore, what is this business, Forage-Livestock quotes and concepts? What is that? Well, as far as the first part is concerned, you know, Gary Lacefield is a scientist. He knows you always have to have something to compare to. We've had some great presentations this morning. You're going to enjoy them a lot more after you hear me, okay? And as far as that second part, I'm going to explain that business about the Forage-Livestock quotes and concepts. Gary Lacefield and I have worked together for a long time on a lot of projects. We've expended a lot of effort to try to spread information about forage livestock production. And we've talked about that through the years, and not long ago, or not a while ago, we had a conversation in which we talked about, you know, isn't it interesting how certain questions come up time and time again? And some issues that come up are really, really important. And there are some things that, whether they're very important or not, some of them are, some aren't, there are some things that forage livestock producers just need to know. And we had an idea. Yes, we did. We had an idea. And by the way, do you know what an idea looks like? Watch this. That's what an idea looks like right there. We had an idea, and the idea was maybe we can be a little bit proactive and put together some kind of document that would address these things that come up on a frequent basis, these things that are really important, and these things that about forage livestock production that people just need to know. And so we decided we'd take this approach. We would identify concepts that we thought were worthy of being included in this publication. Then we decided we'd explain the concepts, not some lengthy thing, not a book about it, but just a succinct paragraph that grasped the essence of why that particular concept is included. And then we decided we'd link a quote to each concept, and the idea is that maybe the quote would help people to remember the concept. So we started working on that, and after a little while, you know, we had the idea, well, you know, maybe we might get some of our friends to help us on this. And so we enlisted some really high-quality help. Dr. Vivian Allen from Texas Tech University, Dr. Carl Hovland is retired from the University of Georgia, Dr. Joe Boughton, who was with the University of Georgia and also with the Noble Foundation. And by the way, collectively, those 5 people have over 175 years of experience on the faculties of 7 major universities. That should be worth something. Anyway, we ended up writing this publication titled Forage Livestock Quotes and Concepts. And I want to make it very clear that this was published by the Oregon Forage Seed Commissions. There are 4 of those: ryegrass, clover, tall fescue, orchard grass. Gary and I have worked with them for a long period of time. Great folks. Some of you may not know that about 70%, no, about 90% of the cool season forage and turf seed is produced in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. So they really provide a great service for us. And I also want to mention that, we had some great people who reviewed this publication for us. I'm not going to read their names, but they're listed in the book, and we certainly appreciate their contribution. Now, about 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, Gary and Carl Hovland and I put together a document titled 10 Keys to a Profitable Forage Program. To tell you the truth, when we were putting together this Quotes and Concepts book, that document never even crossed our minds. However, For the sake of this presentation today, in the interest of giving a little bit of structure, I'm going to mention each of those 10 keys that we put in that document. And then I'm going to take one or two quotes from this publication that relate to each key. Of course, there are many more quotes than that in the publication, but just to give you a little bit of a flavor of the publication, I'm going to mention one or two of each one. And I don't have time to explain all the concepts, but I'll give you a little bit of insight into what we were thinking about those as well. All right, here's one of the keys to profitability. Know your options and your needs. You know, anybody who's in the forage livestock business, you know, they need to know, I think, what forage crops can be grown in each field on their farm. They need to know what the distribution of growth of those forage crops would be. They need to know the nutritional needs of their animals. They need to know the times of the year when there's going to be pasture forage available. A lot of things like that you just need to know if you're going to do it right. Alexander Graham Bell agrees with that. He said, before anything else, preparation is the key to success, and that applies to a lot more than forage livestock production. Another key to profitability, stand establishment is critical. Hey, after all, if you don't have a good forage stand, you're not going to get good forage production. And there are a lot of things about stand establishment that we could talk about. I want to present just a couple here. One is good variety decisions don't guarantee success, but bad ones can certainly guarantee failure. And, you know, we all need to pay attention to varieties, understand what they can do for us. And here's another one that I kind of like. Cheap seed is rarely a bargain. You know why I think a lot of people sell cheap seed? Because they know their seed isn't worth very much. That's why they sell it cheap. You know, my observation has been that producers often tend to want to cut corners on buying seed. In my opinion, that is absolutely not the right place to cut corners. It'd be better off to buy the most expensive seed they can buy than to do that. Here's another key to profitability. We always need to think about soil fertility and nutrient considerations. About a year ago, my friend and colleague and successor at Auburn University, Dr. Jennifer Johnson, wrote an article titled, "If you don't soil test, you'll be forced to guess." And that is exactly right. All of you have heard something like that before. If somebody just guesses on what to put out, obviously they're almost certainly going to put out too much fertilizer and waste money, or they're not going to put enough fertilizer out and not get optimum forage growth. That's just the way it is. Now, to be honest with you, I don't particularly like to talk about soil testing. I find it kind of boring and mundane, but it's important. It is important, and we need to think about it. I went through a little exercise a few months ago. I sat at my desk, and I said, well, what if a producer over-fertilized by this much on this species or that species, and what if he under-fertilized by this much? What would be the impact on forage production? What would be the impact on economics? And it didn't take me long to figure out that soil testing can actually be worth several $100s per hour. That's how important it is. All right, here's another idea that has grown on me through the years. Where animals go, nutrients flow. Well, you know, animals consume a lot of forage, and in doing that, they consume a lot of nutrients. But guess what? They're basically in one end and out the other, because about 80% of the nutrients consumed by animals are excreted in the form of urine and dung. And you know, I think that a producer ought to periodically think about where the nutrient flows are on his farm, because there are nutrient flows on every farm. Producer needs to know where those nutrient flows are. He needs to have some feel for the extent of those nutrient flows. And if he gets on top of that, he can probably make changes that will even out that distribution of nutrients that will ultimately impact on soil fertility and the economics of his operation. Another key to profitability is to use legumes whenever feasible. And this next quote I'm going to give you is one of my favorites in this book. It is, 248, let's renovate. That's a saying that Joe Burns, who used to be extension forage specialist at the University of Tennessee, used to use a lot. What Joe was talking about was renovating tall fescue, and he used to recommend 2 pounds of white clover, 4 pounds of red clover, 8 pounds of annual lespedeza. Now, you know, depending on where you are and what you're renovating and everything else, you might use different seeding rates or different legumes. But the fact of the matter is that legumes have a lot to offer. This is the Don Ball story. They often can result in higher forage yield, especially as compared to grasses that are getting little or no nitrogen fertilization. They almost always provide better forage quality. That results in higher animal gains or more milk production, often increased conception. In the case of toxic endophyte tall fescue, reduced toxicity potential. In many cases, you can get a longer grazing season by including a legume, and because of biological nitrogen fixation, less fertilizer cost. That results in greater profit potential, and that makes, I think, this statement true. Legumes are forage crop superstars. Now, I know that legumes are not perfect. They're harder to grow. They're more difficult to keep a stand of. And a lot of people tell me, well, I don't want to grow legumes because I'm afraid of bloat. But I just want to make this particular statement, provide this quote: fear of bloat costs more than bloat itself. I don't want to minimize the importance of bloat. It can be devastating. But I do believe that statement's true. Here's another similar statement, by the way. A lot more animals have died of starvation than have died of bloat. All right. Here's another key to profitability. We need to have attention to forage quality. And I'm going to give you just one little quote here. I like this one for two reasons. It makes a good point, and it rhymes. How about that? Poor hay quality brings double woe. Intake declines because digestion is slow. In other words, if you've got a good hay and a bad hay, when the animals eat the good hay, they're going to get more nutrients per pound consumed, aren't they? But not only that, they're going to eat more pounds of it, so they're going to get more nutrients in their body. It's like a double whammy if you've got bad hay. Here's another key. We need to prevent or minimize pest and forage-related animal disorders. Scott Flynn did a good job of talking about the economics of weed control. Of course, we sometimes have to deal with insects and diseases. And there are several different animal disorders that can be a problem, but there's one in particular that, in my opinion, based on my experience, is costing us a heap of money in the forage livestock business, and we need to do something about it more than we've done. What I'm talking about is fescue toxicity. Now, I know that not everybody here is in fescue country, but a lot of you are from fescue country. You know, we've been working on this fescue endophyte thing for 35 years now, and we know that when you have toxic endophyte fescue as compared to non-infected fescue, weaning weights are often, not always, but often 50 pounds or more lower. Stock or cattle gains per animal can be 100 pounds or more lower. And actually, they can be hundreds of pounds lower in terms of gain per acre. Reproductive rates can be 10 to 30% lower. The bottom line is that there are a lot of producers that are losing hundreds, thousands, and even tens of thousands of dollars to toxic endophyte tall fescue. And a quote here that I want to make to apply to that is opportunity cost count. Opportunity cost is a term that economists often use as being the cost that somebody incurs because they didn't do something. In my opinion, the fescue toxicity situation is a perfect example of that. Because if somebody has toxic endophyte tall fescue and they don't either do like Joe Burns recommended and grow some legumes with it, or plant and graze a non-toxic tall fescue, they're going to incur serious opportunity cost losses, and they're going to incur those year after year after year. Another key to profitability: exercise good grazing management. I think everybody in this room knows that pastures are essentially solar collectors. If you cut down the size of the solar collector, you're cutting down energy interception. So if pastures don't have a certain minimum level of leaf tissue present, you're not going to get as much photosynthetic activity and as much growth. Simple statement. And this term overgrazing, I think, is not fully appreciated by a lot of people. You know, a lot of people think of overgrazing is where you put way too many animals in a pasture and they've grazed everything down to a nub. Well, that is overgrazing, but also when you have a good amount of forage present, and if the animals have the opportunity, they will selectively graze, and they will, you know what they'll do? They'll go along and eat what they want. They'll pick out the most desirable, most palatable plants, put more grazing pressure on them, weaken them, and perhaps eliminate them from the stand. So that's overgrazing too. Another key to forage profitability is to minimize stored feed requirements. You know, I think that there are a lot of producers who just don't think much about their hay feeding period. They don't think much about their stored feeding period. They just accept it. But in reality, if they would think about it and work at it a little bit, they could cut it way down. And I can tell you that throughout my career, if there's anything that I've really seen the truth of in my career, it is this. It costs less when the livestock harvest the forage. You feel free to quote me on that if you'd like to. All right. Here's another one. Key to forage profitability, minimize hay storage and feeding losses. You know, I talked earlier about opportunity costs. Well, this is the opposite of that. In the case of hay, a guy who's made hay, he's put all the thought, time, energy, sweat, effort, and money into the hay, and then it's lost. And, you know, I think a lot of guys know that they're actually losing some money and doing in poor hay storage and feeding, but they don't recognize how much they're losing. Now, the really most effective way to protect hay is to build some kind of a storage structure like this. However, I can tell you, and there's a lot of producers that ought to listen to this next quote and take it to heart. Some folks pay for a hay barn they never build because, in essence, they are paying for it with the losses of hay that they're getting through using poor hay storage techniques. And here's the last key to forage profitability. It is results require investments. You take somebody who's got a good forage program, that didn't happen by accident. They put a lot into that forage program, and that is absolutely what is required. In other words, there ain't no free lunch. That applies to a lot more than forage livestock production, but it applies to that as well. And I want to add one more quote that really applies to a lot of things that we do in forage livestock agriculture. And this is a quote by one of our own, Mr. Russell Hackley. And I know he said this because I heard him say it. I heard him say it at an AFGC conference 2 years ago up in, Covington, Kentucky. He said, beware of emotional decisions. Now, there may be times that we want to make emotional decisions, intentionally. But if there's money involved, you'd better beware of emotional decisions. I certainly believe that. Anyway, I just want to tell you that this Forage Quotes and Concepts publication, we have it here. There are copies in the back. You can take a copy for free, no charge whatsoever. You can thank the Oregon Forage Seed Commissions for that, incidentally. And I just want to assure you, in case anybody has the wrong idea about this, there's no hidden agenda regarding this publication. There's no profit incentive for us or the Forage Commissions. This was done simply to help people recognize and better understand what we think are some important concepts about forage livestock production. And I'm going to take the liberty to make just one more statement. I think some of you might be interested in this. This is totally off the topic. But you might be interested in knowing that we've just revised the book Southern Forages. It's the most extensive revision we've done yet. It's at the printer now. Copies will probably be available this month. Thank you for your attention.